On this week's Carrier App, we speak with Comtel on how digital service providers and telecom operators can benefit from sponsored data models. All right, well, thanks for joining us on this week's Carrier App. I'm your host, Stan Meyer, editor-in-chief here at RCR Wireless News. And this week we are joined by Mikko Jarva, who's the CTO of Intelligent Data at Comtel, to talk a bit about the sponsored data market and kind of get some insight there from what's happening in terms of that market. So Mikko, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Very good, very good. Let me start off with, for those who don't know much about Comtel, maybe a little background on the company and kind of what you guys do there.
Yeah. We are a software vendor from Finland. Most of our customers, 300 customers, globally, they are communication service providers. So we are very heavily in telco. Our software is working in the core of the customer service life cycles. For example, it refines about 20% of the mobile usage data in the world and refines that into intelligent services, charging. And then we also, our software enables about 1.2 billion connections. That's for both consumers and enterprises. So in a way, we are rather small, but then we have a really large sort of a reference base, and we are there in the core of telco software.
Very good, very good. So yeah, I know. So the topic I want to talk a bit about with you guys is in terms of sponsored data, and I guess that's been kind of, at least here in the U.S., it's been a bit of a, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's been a little slow to take off for some companies. Some carriers are doing it. I know internationally, it's a lot more happening in terms of sponsored data. So I guess what is maybe what's Comtel's kind of view of sponsored data and how that can work in the mobile telecom space?
Yeah, we see generally a couple of types of a sponsored data model. The first one is probably so that there's a piece of an advertisement. It's typically from a third party, and then you typically first watch that piece of an advertisement, and then that unlocks your access to either content or data, or it gives you some bonus data available. So that would be the first model of sponsored data. The other kind of model, I think, is a bit more interesting. It is that use a content service that has a very heavy data use. It's a very good example, of course, is Netflix. And then typically, if that Netflix data is charged from your operator account or so forth, you easily end up losing all your data within one streaming session or so forth. So there's a nice opportunity to actually have that data being sponsored by the Netflix or whoever is the content provider. And we see that is the more interesting model because it's less about advertising and it's more about the customer experience. And it's essentially a win-win-win B2B2C or B2B2B2C model, actually. So we find that a bit more interesting. It also makes a huge amount of sense. If you think about in US, for example, over 50% of the downstream traffic is streaming, Netflix, YouTube, Amazon, and the like. And so that always should be handled in some kind of cooperation with the content provider and CSPs. It makes a huge lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, obviously. And so I guess, have you seen much success in terms of these models? I mean, I think initially, like you were mentioning, the advertisement ones where you see some advertisement, get some free data, those have kind of seen some traction, but it does seem like that this more of sponsoring of streaming content does seem like a bigger opportunity there. I guess, are you seeing some good uptake there, or I guess some carriers, or I guess what's the reception so far to that model?
Yeah, we see some early success with some of our customer partnering, for example, with Netflix that was mentioned. So they integrate Netflix with their billing and customer care processes and have a real-time integration into the infrastructure of Netflix and check whether the customer have the subscription available. And then usually the data usage for that is zero rated. And in some cases, also our operator customers are putting the Netflix charges on the bill of the customers. So there is increasing cooperation there, and we are seeing some early success in there as well. What we did also, we presented a blueprint together with our sales force in Telemanagement Forum in Nice. That was in early May.
Yep.
And it went well. We got the most innovative commercial catalyst award in there. So we sort of have an idea how to make this sponsored data work in a nice way.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I guess as we mentioned too, I know here in the U.S. at least, again, everybody, all the carriers we talk to, Netflix is obviously a big part of their data streaming, and they're seeing a lot of traffic there. And it does seem like that would make sense to have some sort of program in place. But I guess it still has been a bit. It hasn't just taken off that much here in the U.S. Again, I know overseas it's been a little more positive there. I guess why haven't such models perhaps gained more traction in the U.S. at this point? Is there some sort of issues that are still kind of being worked through? Or I guess what's your view on why it hasn't quite taken off just yet? Is it maybe the platform is just not ready for it yet?
Yeah. When we're looking at the U.S. Carriers, so they seem to have some kind of models based on sponsored data. I think T-Mobile's Binge On, I think there must be some kind of sponsored data arrangement behind it. Then there is an AT&T, they have the data perks. That's the traditional kind of a sponsored data model where you watch an advertisement and then you get some data bonuses. And then there is a freebie by Verizon. I think they just launched it, so it's sort of in a trial phase or so. Yeah. I think there are a couple of things. It seems to be that those services are rather limited, so it's limited to specific kind of streaming services only. And on the other hand, the regulation or the interpretation of the regulation is, of course, a big question mark for these services to get more common.
Yeah, I was asking about that. Obviously, I think, the regulatory issue is always kind of one of those things that operators need to be careful about in terms of, especially recently here in the U.S., I know it's been an issue. I guess, is that kind of been one of the big challenges you're seeing is the fact that operators are trying to tiptoe around what could be some regulatory, challenges here and there? Is that kind of still a bit of an issue?
Yeah, definitely there are regulatory challenges. And if I understand correctly, the traffic prioritization is out of the question at the moment. At the moment, with the current interpretation of the regulatory, all in all, by doing the sponsored data model would be sort of a zero rating model or so forth. And the jury seems to be still out on this topic. I think the regulatory commission even asked for some information and opinions about the zero rating practices, whether they are okay or not. And there was sort of a strong industry opinion that zero rating actually should be allowed. So yeah, the jury is really out in there yet. So that's interesting. What is the conclusion in the end? And obviously, it probably will change over the time again and again.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's true because it does seem like the operators, not just here in the US, but even overseas, it seems like they do want to kind of embrace this model because obviously for them, it can provide another revenue stream, obviously, which is good. But also it does seem to be, if done correctly, it can be consumer friendly, which, at the end of the day, regulators, you would think, would want it to be consumer friendly. So there's a possibility for it to kind of help out all sides. I mean, obviously there's some fine tuning here and there, but it does seem like it should be positive for everybody involved, really.
Yeah, exactly. Like mentioned before, it's sort of a win-win-win model. Yeah. I mean, operators, it's a new revenue stream. Of course, if we allow some prioritization of the content services, then especially that would increase the revenues out of sponsored data. And then, of course, the content providers, they benefit also because they can ensure the customer experience for their customers, and then end user benefits the most. They don't have any more the unclarity of how much my mobile data will this Game of Thrones episode utilize. So yeah, that would be a nice model, really.
And again, like we were saying earlier too, with video becoming such an increasing part of all this data traffic, I'm sure, like you said, for consumers, if they have a little more a confidence in what they're doing there in terms of how much data is being used, and they know it's not eating up their entire bucket of data. Again, it could be a positive thing for everybody involved. But again, it's just a matter of working through that. But I guess maybe looking forward a little bit. I mean, what are maybe some of the bigger challenges you guys see maybe facing the industry in terms of growing this adoption of sponsored data, kind of, not just here, obviously we're a bit US focused here, but obviously I think overseas as well. What are maybe some of the challenges you guys see in terms of growing this business case out there?
Yeah, well, of course, in addition to the regulation and commercial issue to make it happen, in a commercial sense, you will need to then really come up with the partnership with the operators and the content providers and third parties. But maybe sort of technically, and as a model, what we see quite a big challenge is sort of being able to provide this seamless, real-time, end-to-end process or framework where the different parties can come together and enable sponsored data on the fly. For example, if you look into the Verizon program now, you go to the website and look into how do you actually enroll a new content provider into that there's no such option actually, or so. There's no automatic onboarding portal, where any content provider can go to and say that, oh, I want to have my data or content sponsor. And T-Mobile doesn't have that either, or so forth. So it seems to be still sort of a customizing process to get a specific content onboarded. If we think about that process, actually, how do we get a content to get 0 rated and then have all the settlement done properly in the background or so forth? That actually touches a lot of systems. It might touch this billing systems, order management, catalog systems. It might touch the sort of front-end digital shops. It might touch the charging components and all the way to the network or so forth. So sort of coming up this blueprint is quite an interesting challenge there. But essentially the blueprint should be so that anybody can go to a portal and say, I want to have my content sponsored and I'm willing to pay for it. And they pay and click a button and then it works.
Yeah, so I guess making it easier for the content providers, like you said, that's a big part of this. If you can make it simple and make it somewhat uniform, obviously that would help as well. Because I'm sure the last thing they want to deal with is each operator having a specific way to do things, and if it's always different, that just slows down the whole process going along that way.
Yeah, and what we think is that in fact actually requires a more agile BSS blueprint all in all. So that's something we also looking to demonstrate. So I mentioned our cooperation with Salesforce and the Telemanagement Forum in Nice, and now we're improving the blueprint and out again to demonstrate it in Dreamforce and in our next Denote event and also in the Telemanagement Forum Live even in Asia. So we think that we have an idea how to make that happen, and we are willing to showcase this during the end of this year. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. Well, again, like you were saying, it's definitely a market that I think operators are getting more and more involved in. Consumers are looking for it as well. So it sounds like it's one of those things that's kind of getting ready to take off. It's just a matter of getting all the pieces in place to make it a simple process for everybody involved. So that's obviously kind of what we're working through. But great insight there. We'll definitely meet. We appreciate the insight on the topic. Obviously, as this kind of market continues to grow, hopefully we can touch base again soon and get an update from you guys on kind of what's happening both at CompTail, but also in the market as well. So we definitely appreciate the time and insight today. Well, thanks for watching this week's show, and make sure to check out our next carrier app when we speak with Ultra Mobile on the MVNO space. Thanks for watching.